Good morning, and we'll call to order the meeting of the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada. Ms. Quigley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the agenda, or members of the committee. Your agenda is completely jacked up today, so I am going to go ahead and let you know we do need to make some changes to the order of the agenda. Councilman Ross is unable to attend the meeting today, but he wishes to call in regarding item number 57, which concerns Interstate 11. In light of that fact, we would like to ask that after the agenda is approved, we conduct citizens' participation and then move to item number 57. After item number 57, I'll provide the general manager's report, NDOT will provide the NDOT director's report, and then the consent agenda and the rest of the non-consent agenda. Also, we are requesting that item number 54 on the consent agenda be removed. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, also note that Commissioner Lawrence Weekly wishes to speak on item number 59, the local jobs resolution. For item number 55, I also will be reading a letter written by Vice Chair Deborah March. Mr. Chairman, with those requests, your agenda is otherwise in order and ready for your approval.
Okay, what was the first one? Item number 37?
57.
57. Okay.
Yeah, that's the Boulder, I-11 Boulder City Bypass RFQ.
Okay. Those changes? A motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
Okay, so now we are moving to, we'll move right to citizens' participation.
This is the first of our two public comment periods. Those wishing to speak on a specific agenda item, now is your opportunity, and I would certainly like to recognize two of our colleagues, Commissioner Weekly and Commissioner Sisolak, and ask Mr. Figgins, do we have an illegal quorum in the House of the County Commission? We don't. You both are safe. So, Commissioner Weekly?
Morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm here to speak on the resolution that you all will address this morning. At our last county commission meeting, that item did come before us and it did pass. And prior to that, I had the opportunity to meet with a very good, active, distinguished work group who really shares a lot of concerns that's addressed in the resolution that you all will look at here today. I'm here because as a result of that resolution here, it's really incumbent that you all really consider it and hopefully support it, simply because as we talk about local opportunities, opportunities for many folks to have an opportunity to get back to work. And this is not about some political speeches and all this mumbo jumbo that you hear. This is real talk. As a person who represents Clark County District D, looking at the proposed projects that were presented to us, there are possibly 70 public works projects that could take place in my district. And I don't have to share with you all the number of people that live in Clark County District D that are unemployed, let alone Southern Nevada. And so it's our hope that as you all consider this resolution, that you all do understand that there are a number of people that really should benefit from what's being presented to you all here today. Not that I have a problem with anybody else outside of Nevada state lines, but I just hate to see a number of people traveling into Nevada, taking the work away and taking it back to their communities. As I said to Ms. Quigley when she came in and met with my group and met with myself personally, I have a neighbor who this man has to leave his family every Sunday afternoon to travel out of state to work. And his wife just had a baby. I think she's a couple months old now, but they have 3 children. And so during the course of the school week, with school now back in session, this mother, she has to not only get the kids off to school, get the baby to child care, but also work herself. And this is very stressful. And to have people right here in our own community, and we're passing ordinances and bills and something like the fuel tax, that Nevadans are going to have to shoulder the burden of this. Why is it that Nevadans would have to travel out of state to work? And so I really hope that we all come together and we all do what's in the best interest of Southern Nevadans. And so I'm humbly and sincerely asking you all for your support here today, and I just want to again thank Ms. Quigley very much for your time, you and your staff. You all answered a lot of the questions. You know, I had a lot of hesitation in supporting this fuel tax, but I think at the end of the day, I believe that a lot of people will be blessed, and so I now kind of feel like what it feels like to stand here and hoping that I see the clock ticking down. Sister-like, I think I just want the buzzer to go off to see what it really feels like. But at any rate, thank you all very much. Bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else wishing to speak on a specific agenda item? Again, now is the opportunity.
Good morning. My name is Jean Payton. I live at 1604 Bluestone Drive, Las Vegas. I'm here today. I'm a paratransit user. My guide dog and I are on it regularly. And I'm also the chair of the Transportation Access Advisory Committee. And I'm here today just to speak on behalf of item 44, which is in your consent agenda. And that is the item that covers the proposed training and certification center to be built here in Southern Nevada. And I just want you to know that I think on many, many levels, it's just a wonderful opportunity to upgrade everything that's going on with paratransit certification, the training of people to use fixed route and paratransit. And it will be just a it'll be a center that really brings good attention to the programs that RTC provides and to the staff as well. So I'm just hoping that that goes forward. I think it'll be a wonderful opportunity for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Jean, for your comments and certainly for your contributions to the agency. Greatly appreciated. Okay, I don't have any other cards, so we will close this portion of public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, we will move on to item number 57, and Dr. Fred O'Heaney will handle that presentation.
Thanks, Tina. Item 57 is to approve the request for qualifications evaluation factors for I-11 Boulder City Bypass Design Build project. Mr. Chairman, the RTC intends to issue a request for qualifications followed by a request for proposals for the design and construction of the I-11 Boulder City Bypass project under a design-build contract. This is being done in cooperation with NDOT, the Federal Highway Administration, and the City of Boulder City. In a two-step process, all statements of qualifications submitted in response to the RFQ will be evaluated in accordance with the proposed evaluation factors. A short list consisting of no more than 3 qualified respondents will be selected to submit proposals in response to a subsequent RFP. Pursuant to NRS 3381727, after review of all the proposals, a stipend will be provided to each responsive proposer for the proposer's work if the proposer is not awarded an actual design-build contract. And, Mr. Chairman, to give everybody an orientation of what we're talking about, there are 2 phases to this project. What you see on the display, we show phase 1, which is colored in green. It's a 3-mile segment between US 95 and Railroad Pass. That is being done under the auspices of NDOT. The second phase, which is referred to as phase 2, is a 12-mile segment between US 95 and the Nevada interchange. That is what RTC is going to be responsible for, and that is going to be solicited as a design-build contract. As I mentioned, there are 2 steps to this procurement process. The first step being a request for qualifications, where we would shortlist 3 firms and then subsequently issue a request for proposals to those shortlisted firms. And at this point, Mike is going to walk you through the evaluation factors, and I'll do the closing on this item.
Thanks, Fred. Just to step quickly through the factors on the request for qualifications.
Could you identify yourself for the record?
Yes, sir. Mike Hand, Director of Engineering Services, RTC of Southern Nevada. Stepping quickly through the factors, on the pie chart here, organization and key personnel is worth 25%. Project understanding is 20%. Experience of the firms is also 25%, past performance, 15%, safety and their safety organization and plan is 5%, and subcontracting plan and their solicitation for disadvantaged business enterprises and subcontractors is included at 5%, and finally, local knowledge and experience, the last 5%. As Fred mentioned, a maximum of 3 respondents will be shortlisted to move on to the RFP phase, and the 2 non-successful of those 3 would receive a stipend upon completion of a successful proposal in the amount of $350,000. The stipend, just a little more detail on that. It's recommended that the proposers who submit responsive proposals in response to the RFP but are not awarded the actual design-build contract would receive the stipend. Stipends are frequently used in a procurement of this size and scope to encourage competition and help defray the cost of proposal development. In exchange for the payment of the stipend, the RTC will receive all rights to all of the proposer's work product produced on the RFP. We have a fairly standard restrictions on lobbying and RTC contacts proposed. One of 2 options that you've used in the past. This one, as currently proposed, restricts what we call the cone of silence from the date of issuance of the request for qualifications, which is currently targeted for on or about October 10th, until the actual board meeting that determines the short list of proposers. That's what we currently have in the recommendation. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, and I think Fred, you have a little bit at this
Correct.
point.
Mr. Chairman, regarding the cone of silence, the board has done it 2 ways. One being from the issuance of the request for qualifications to the date of the board meeting, or the issuance from the date of the issuance of the request for qualifications to the date that the agenda item is posted for the selection of the firm. So at this point, staff is open to both options. We've gone back and forth. The board has gone back and forth several times. We want to just get direction on which option you would prefer for this particular solicitation, and we'll make that happen.
Question to the board. I know that Ms. Quigley and Fred have spoken to some of you. My preference is, I prefer when the agenda item's posted to allow those applicants to communicate, lobby, advocate, whatever you want to say. I think by putting it to the date of the agenda, the date of the meeting, just at times causes, I think, too much pressure and too much concern that all the information isn't out there. So I'm not sold to go either way, but that would be my preference. And some of us do enjoy being lobbied. Some of us prefer not to. So it's really the choice of the board. Commissioner?
Yeah, I was inclined, it didn't matter really what way, but I do tend to agree with you. If I want to have a scheduled appointment, I'd like to have information, then that should be up to me for those that don't want to, but after that window period, but prior to the, makes better sense. Because, you know, the companies have a right to be able to come in and talk to us, but sometimes we may not have met with them prior to the what do we call it, the cone of silence. So at least that way you get some information.
And this is such a big contract, and not only in its cost, but the impact on Southern Nevada, certainly our Boulder City, and I'd like to be able to communicate with that. But as the Commissioner said, we can always say no. Comments from the other commissioners? Mayor?
I would go ahead and agree with the comments that have been made. I think it's important that we do get that input prior to the meeting itself. And I'll hold comment on the local knowledge and experience for a few seconds here, unless if you want to bring that up, because I think we actually need to have that raised. I think it's important that we have local input, local builders, and I think we need to make that part of this agreement as well.
And we will come back to that. Critically important, Mayor, thank you. Mayor Tobler?
Yeah, I'm good with making that change.
Okay. All right, and for the public record, Councilman Ross has joined us on the phone. Councilman, are you there? Wasn't interested, he hung up. Just let us know if he's back on the line. So on this I think you have direction from the board on the. Yeah, now, to the mayor's point, we're looking at local knowledge and experience, and please, Mr. Figgins, if we start moving beyond your comfort range, let us know. The suggestion would be to move that percentage up on the qualification factor. And I don't know where we take it away from.
We have some thoughts on that. Yeah, and in briefing with the board, we certainly learned that local knowledge and experience was something that is very important. In particular, I'm sorry that Councilman Ross cannot be on contributing to the conversation right now, because he has, as you know, a lot of passion, as do a lot of you here, regarding the importance of keeping this local money that we are raising through indexing as local as possible. And so you asked us to go back and take a look at this particular line item. We have also spoken with FHWA, who there will be some federal funds on this project. And we understand that there is a comfort level, if there's a comfort level with the board, to move this up to 10% and then reduce the past performance item to 10% as well. For your consideration.
Mayor, would that be acceptable?
That would be acceptable to myself.
Okay, again, I think you have direction.
Okay.
This certainly, and as was stated at the county commission meeting, we're limited in guaranteeing the local jobs. But
Correct.
through our resolution today, and I hope our other member agencies would likewise do some kind of resolutions in their agencies, but we need to send a strong signal to the industry that we are encouraging, without mandating, local participation. And there's going to be a lot of work out there, and even some of these firms that are going to compete outside of Southern Nevada, we need to clearly send our message and have them understand that there's nothing more important than seeing Nevada license plates at the job sites. Commissioner?
Question, I totally agree, and I appreciate the mayor bringing that up. I had just thought of this. Is that local knowledge factor under statute, it was AB whatever, I forget now, they allowed for at least a 5%?
This is federal money. So for local money, you are correct.
Okay.
Local money, that applies. This will have some federal money mixed in with it, and
Right.
so we couldn't apply that particular bill.
But we could, through our processing, make the change that's been suggested of the 10 and 10?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And then in addition to that, is that only when it's a design, build, or an RFQ? Or can we now, as Commissioner said, maybe go back to each of our own communities or our own commissions and councils and have a similar resolution adopted to change that percentage threshold that we do in our RFPs and RFQs?
When you have federal money involved, there's only two approaches that you can take to add a local, we can't call it a preference, but to
Right.
have a local
Acknowledge.
knowledge considered. You can only do that with the CMAR, the construction management risk, or the design build.
Okay, so it's limited to
So
those. That's
those
what
are
I
the
was just-
only two, yeah.
But we still, as a body, could update our resolutions as county commissions, city councils, and so forth for at least the CMAR and those two types and increase.
Oh,
I
to
think we're
also, yeah, that would be up to you.
To
And I can
match
have
it, because in
Chris
other words, we're
weigh in
still
on
at
that, but-
5%, but we could possibly go to 10% if we did that through a public hearing. That's what I'm just trying to.
No, the statute talks about a 5% preference just for, it's a preference in the amount of your bid. So it's a little bit different than what you're talking, this is a factor in performance, so it's a little bit different than what we're talking about. But the statute sets that preference, and you can't change that.
I think what her question is, though, is that when the other entities, not just RTC, when the other entities go to do a construction management risk or a design build, can they likewise adopt a 10%?
For selection purposes.
Yes, and
Well,
turn it to legal.
I'd hope that everybody understands that it's more than just keeping local jobs. It has to be based on what is the preference doing it? What is the performance factor? Why do we need local people working on it? And that's the issue we should focus on, is what advantage does
Whether
it
it's
do?
knowledge, expertise,
Right.
the ability to deliver more quickly, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe down the road, we should all just have our legal people work with us as
Yes.
separate entities and take a look at that process, so, okay, thank you.
Mayor?
I remember at the state that the engineers and the architects didn't have the same opportunity for bidder's preference and stuff because they work on a different type of system. And I question that when we talk about local qualifications, we're talking from the brain power that writes these plans on, and not just the workers in the field. Is that correct?
The bill that was amended this year included the engineers and so that they now have the 5%, the preference would apply to their workforce too.
Oh, thank you. That's news to me. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor. And one last communication to the board. Over the next few months, Ms. Quigley and her staff will be briefing us on this process. I would encourage us to stay engaged. This is a landmark project, not only for the recently passed indexing, but certainly from the state and from a national level. This is a big one, and we want to be as prepared and as efficient going through this process. This will really be a strong signal sent to a lot of different industries. So stay engaged, board members, on this one.
Oh, you won't have a choice. We're going to come knock on your door every month and talk to you about it.
Councilman Ross, some comments.
Councilman Ross, do you have comments?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Sounds like the flood warning
Mr.
system.
Chairman, with your permission, may I say a few words?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
I think the general manager in her presentation indicated the changing the percentages in regards to the 5% to 10% of local participation, and then, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Quigley, the experience is from 15 to 10%. Is that correct?
It's currently written as 5%. Local knowledge and experience currently was written as 5%.
Okay, I couldn't understand you.
It's currently written as 5%.
But the consideration right now is,
My recommendation then to the board, for you, Mr. Chairman, is that we change that from 5% to 10%. I think it's, I heard you state that we're sending a clear message to the industry that we want local participation, and I think that needs to be key in all of our efforts at the RTC, that we continue with that position. So I would suggest that any motions made, that would include my comments.
Tell them yes.
Okay.
Good.
okay. Thank you, Councilman Ross.
If there's no further discussion, I'll make the motion.
He'll make the motion.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I would move to follow staff's recommendation, and also with the changes from the 5% to 10% and the 15% local experience to 10%, and move forward with this resolution. That's my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. There's a motion on the floor, long distance. Is that okay, Chris? Have a long distance motion?
This is gonna be
All those in
10.
favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Aye.
And that motion carries. Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the commission, we will now go back to our general manager's report. I'd like to start this general manager's report by recognizing an outstanding professional who continues to serve as a virtual arm of the RTC. Together with her team, this individual represents ITN Las Vegas Valley, an organization providing transportation services to the elderly and visually impaired adults in various parts of the valley through our Alternative Transportation Services program. She is always on board for outreach opportunities, meetings with the community, and works diligently to successfully help her customers. She is a true community partner, and we are grateful for her commitment. Please help me recognize Fran Smith with ITN of Las Vegas Valley. Fran, if I could ask you to come up.
Get the chairman's mic. This is great. Glenn Levitt called me a couple weeks ago to tell me that you were going to do this. And I was driving. So that was really a dangerous thing. I am absolutely overwhelmed and floored by this. I really, I'm almost speechless about how I feel. But I do want to point out that we have a really great team. I don't do any of this alone. We have a tremendous crew of drivers who are repeatedly complimented by their customers. Our dispatch operation is flying all the time. Our board is committed to the mission, and honestly, ITN would hardly be what it is if it weren't for the RTC and the fantastic partnership. It's really probably one of the most gratifying partnerships I've participated in. I'm really overwhelmed. Thank you so much, commissioners. I am really honored. Thank you.
Feeling is mutual. We also have with us Ms. Linda Manine, Operations Director at the Nevada Blind Children's Foundation. She wants to share a few words of congratulations in honor of Fran as well.
Good morning.
Good morning. I am Linda Manine, Nevada Blind Children's Foundation, and I'm honored to be here to congratulate you, Fran. Thank you, and to thank you publicly for all that you've done for Nevada Blind Children's Foundation. We are a very small nonprofit, privately funded, and we really have to rely on sources. And she has stepped up to the plate to assist us. There is no school for the blind in all of Nevada. So we have a learning center. We bridge the gap between a public education and the very special needs of children who are visually impaired. So we have a learning center, and we have children who have trouble getting to the learning center after school. We are just outside the paratransit route. So Fran has stepped up to the plate and really assisted us in a time of need. So I want to personally congratulate her and thank you for my time to let you know.
Thank you.
Before you go, though,
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah.
Give us a little bit more information on your organization.
Oh, Nevada Blind Children's
For
Foundation.
those people out there that may not be aware, how do they contact you?
Absolutely. We are 5 years young. We have a learning center now, and we are at the 215 at Sunset. And our website is www.nvblindchildren.org.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yeah, thank you, Linda. All right, we have some other great news to share. The RTC officially opened UNLV's Transit Center, located right on campus, on September 4th. Senator Reed, Governor Sandoval, UNLV, local, state, and federal leaders attended the grand opening, which was sponsored by Samsung. I'll tell you more about that. Our transit service began operating out of the center the next day on September 5th. We are excited about this new addition to our community as it provides a modern, convenient transportation option for those living and working in the Maryland Parkway UNLV corridor. Now, Samsung was the sponsor of that event we had because they are a partner with us on one of the routes that will be servicing that transit center. They, at no cost to the RTC, piloted a program called, what do we call it, Transit Tap. It'll be along the Centennial Express route. The pilot program allows customers to purchase and use fare on a pay-as-you-go or a pay-in-advance system using a card, allowing riders the ability to use a contactless fare payment method, which a credit card, when boarding the vehicle. So actually a lot like a Starbucks card or a prepaid credit card. The Samsung team has brought a lot to the table in terms of development and operational support for this project, which has allowed the RTC to explore this new technology, again, at no cost to us. They've been a great partner to us, and we look forward to assessing the results of this pilot program. So Councilman Ross is not here with us today, but I know he rides this route regularly into work, and so we are actually using him as a guinea pig, as a test on this. So far, he's figured, what's that? So far, he's passed all the tests. He's been writing.
Do we have his credit card?
It's got a limit on it. Other exciting news, during the Clark County Commission's September 3rd meeting, the Board of Commissioners approved indexing the fuel tax to inflation in Clark County, which will help raise up to $700 million for critical transportation infrastructure projects throughout Southern Nevada. The ordinance will go into effect on January 1st of next year and last through December 31st of 2016, resulting in approximate 3-cent increases per gallon over each year, approximately. Fuel tax indexing will allow the RTC to issue bonds to fund 183 regionally significant transportation projects, which will improve connectivity, enhance infrastructure, and keep Las Vegas competitive in the Southwest region. In addition to making transportation projects possible, the ordinance will help create between 8,931 and 9,467 person years of employment, not jobs. Person years of employment. All right, next slide. Carl Scarborough is here with us today, and he is going to give you an update to our bus shelter amenities program.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to come and kind of give you an update.
Carl, pull that mic up a little
Sorry.
bit. Perfect.
Thank you for the opportunity to be able to come here today and give you an update on what we've done and where we're headed with the Transit Amenities Program. When we came to you last, we gave you a program or criteria that we were going to use to be able to install bus shelters. Primarily, it boils down to 3 different criteria. The first is ridership, how many people get on the bus at the stop. The second is there room to put a shelter, block wall, some other obstruction behind the sidewalk? And the third would be if there's right-of-way or an easement to take advantage. We started off and we wanted to take care of first the stops that didn't have shelters, and so that was kind of our first pass test that we looked at. Given our safety studies and some of the crashes that we've experienced, we're kind of changing that a little bit, and we're rating ridership and some of the other factors more because it's now a safety issue to get the shelters back behind the sidewalk, and we're starting to prioritize that. On the next phase of 150 shelters, half of those will be at stops that already have shelters. The other 75 will be at stops without shelters. So we're trying to balance the need to provide this amenity for our riders and to address safety. So is the site suitable? Again, that's the block wall or the obstruction and right-of-way of easement. And one other thing that we do also look at is we want to make sure that we're being sensitive to environmental justice, to make sure that our shelters are being distributed evenly in the community so that everyone gets an opportunity to participate. The good news is that by focusing on ridership, that tends to fall in line all on its own. And we also want to make sure that we're putting them out in all of our member jurisdictions. So just as a quick briefer, this is a stop that would be suitable for a shelter because it has room and it has an easement and it has the ridership to support installing a shelter, and I wish it was that easy. This is another location where we have the ridership, but it's not suitable for a shelter because of the block wall and the lack of easement or right-of-way behind the sidewalk. This is one that we'll continue to evaluate and see what we can do. And this is on, what is that, Desert Inn at Paradise. Yes. Phase 1 and Phase 2 was 150 shelters installed by the RTC throughout the community. Also, I've included on this map in the purple the shelters that Outdoor Promotions installed under the franchise agreement. There's 40 shelters on the Strip. There's another 25 in the general market. And right now, we're well over 500 shelters in the community that meet all of our safety standards. Phase 3 is what's coming up, and we've purchased the shelters. They're on hand. We'll be coming back with a contract to pour the concrete pad and install those, and we'll see those coming online in the next few months. ADA access improvements. One of the things we did is an assessment of all of our bus stops and how many have connecting pads or ADA access for our customers. So we've just finished Phase 2 of a project. Most of these involved a connecting walkway between the sidewalk and the bus loading area so that all people with whatever their situation is can move between the sidewalk and the vehicle. We still have a few stops. It's a small. We still have a few stops, and it's a small percentage, and that don't meet this criteria, but every single one of those is in an area where you'll have no sidewalk. So you could have a length of roadway for several miles with no sidewalk, and there's really not a lot we as a transit amenities program can do to address that. As the community develops, so we'll continue to monitor those and look for opportunities to upgrade those areas. Bus turnouts, and I want to look up the numbers on this one. We had a couple of Senate bills that required the RTC to work with our member entities to install turnouts. And Senate Bill 173 required 10 turnouts to be constructed by December 31st, 2012. Those are all done. Senate Bill 137, which came out of the subsequent session, required 15 turnouts to be done by December 31st of 2014. All of those are done, but 3, and those 3 are in the works. So we're looking pretty good. Future shelter locations. We went through our database and we identified all the stops where there's right-of-way and where there's room to move shelters back, and we have 884 locations on that map. So these are the locations that we're going to be moving forward with over the next 5 years to get shelters in and upgrade our offerings to our customers. We have just over 100 locations where we have room to install a bench, but not enough room for a shelter. So we have a sidewalk that's at least 6.5 feet wide, but less than 10. We're going to procure 100 benches and install them at these locations at 100. And that should be done this fiscal year. Not should be, it will be done this fiscal year. So it'll allow us to provide something in some of the communities where people are standing or while waiting for the bus. It'll give us an opportunity to provide some amenities for them as well. And I did want to mention, we've had some great partnerships come up. US Bank obviously was kind of the first. We've had Samstown, Fiesta Henderson, Desert Hills Baptist Church, Clark County Parks and Recreation, Ted Weens, North Las Vegas Airport, Robert Macklin, who's a private property owner on Boulder Highway, Walgreens, and the Siegel Group. And all of these companies or individuals have come to us and offered us easements for bus shelters at no cost. And that is a huge community partnership, and it's going to allow us to put shelters where we otherwise couldn't. And I think that's real important, and happy to see the community coming together. And also, I think I need to point out the city of Las Vegas is spending $1 million to acquire right-of-way to put some additional shelters out. They think they're going to be able to get somewhere between 100 and 150 locations. So as the entire community comes together and we combine that with what we can already do, I think we're making good progress towards getting a shelter out at every stop where we can and where there's demand. And if you have any questions.
Comments or questions? Commissioner Giuliani?
Thank you, Carl. You always do good work, and your committee is a good working committee. But I'm going to talk about a couple things that I still have some concerns with. When you speak about the environmental justice, and you're right, that one you showed on DI and Paradise is too narrow a sidewalk, but a bench could go there in some cases. Also, the new ADA requirements come in January, which will require sidewalks to be at 48 inches. So what is our plan to then modify what you've ID'd now as a place that is not able to either have a shelter or a bench to upgrade that component?
And I think, obviously, it's a great question, and it's something that we're going to have to work with the county and the cities on to try to address those. Most of our sidewalks are 5 feet wide. With the 48-inch requirement, it leaves us very little room to do anything. Compounded on that, we now have our safety study that strongly recommends that we put everything at least 5 feet back from the roadway. So we're going to have to look and be real creative as a community on some of these options, whether it's widening the sidewalk or acquiring additional right-of-way or easements or something, trying to figure out how to move these back.
So legislatively, could we add to our agenda for next time around a requirement that easements have to be granted for the purposes of safety for bus shelters for that 5 feet component?
Yeah, that'd be
Maybe
great.
we could, Mr. Chair, if there's no objection, we could add that to a list of potential bill drafts. Second thing would be, when shelters were initially placed, how were they determined where to go? It may have predated you, I have no idea,
It
Carl.
did. RTC took over, really, in early 2006, took over bus shelters. I've been here since early 2007. Everything we've done has been based on ridership. Prior to that, each franchise was managed by the local entity. And I think ridership was an important consideration, but I can't tell you exactly what
And
their
the reason I
criteria
ask that is because you spoke about the economic justice, and as I still drive around our older, more mature parts of town, and yes, where more of my elderly, fragile, and disabled people may live, or maybe those below the average income level, don't even have a bench, let alone a shelter. And I know that we now are looking at the two factors of ridership and safety, but I would tend to disagree that I think we're going to continue or promulgate a disparity that's there just because how it was initially put into play. And now we go, oh, you're too narrow anyway, even though nobody maybe factored that in before, and just put them because they look nicer, or they were in a nicer neighborhood. And I just kind of get tired of seeing folks that are of lower economic income having to stand in the sun, or at least not even have a bench or a trash can to be able to dump things in. So I think that that's still got to be part of what our conversation is, because I don't want to continue that disparity in economic justice.
Yes, and actually, I think that's a very good distinction. When I say we put them out based on ridership, that's at the locations where we can.
Where you could, that's
There are a
right.
number of locations that have very high ridership where we've not done anything because we don't have the right-of-way to meet our safety and ADA requirements. So you're very correct.
Okay, and then can we ask businesses, while we're waiting for a bill draft to maybe go through, to grant easements? So for example, if you've identified in some of our districts areas where one could go, but be it a bench or a shelter, I'd be happy to contact those businesses if I knew who they were to say, would you be willing to donate the 5 feet? So is there a way we could maybe coordinate that and help us identify it as other local? Because in some cases, they would probably do it if they were asked, but we just don't know who they are. I remember Senator Lee, we had a fun legislative process on bus shelters way back in the day. I think you had one delivered to your house at one point or something like that. Somebody, but sometimes if we could help reach out. Siegel Suites you mentioned, they're in everybody's district, and they're a good partner in ours as well. You mentioned the gentleman on Boulder Highway. There may be others, so maybe if you could provide us where you've
Absolutely.
ID'd versus, and then maybe we could do a little business outreach to folks to ask them if they would grant that easement.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You know,
And then at some point, I
Congresswoman
do hope.
Titus's office has asked for a similar list. so.
Okay. Let's see, trash cans, those are not necessarily a regular component. Outdoor Promotions has done a much better job of putting them out there, but there are still areas where there's no trash can and there is a shelter and/or bench. And I do think we've gotten better. I mean, it really is much better. But do we have a number people can call and say, hey, I just drove by 109A and I saw that there isn't X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, they can call our comment line, which is the 228 ride, and they get that information to me. All of the new shelters go in with trash cans. Most of the stops with shelters have trash cans, and as we see special needs, we do get trash cans out.
Okay. And then finally, I hope under the manager's report, you're going to mention the staff and the assistance with the shelters on the advertising campaign for the human trafficking. For the human trafficking?
Oh,
Okay, I
yes.
just think we should
We'll
talk-
be reporting to you on that,
All
too.
right, thank
And
you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Chair.
for bringing that to our attention. Yeah.
Mayor Lee?
Thank you very much, Carl. I surely appreciate you from being there from the beginning, working with Mr. Snow and now Director Quigley. But I vaguely remember those bills, and it wasn't to, I don't want to think that we have to have Senate bills to compel you or encourage you to do more bus turnouts. It's an economic situation. I mean, it's a safety situation. And there's many places in this town where just everything stops while that bus has to do its duty. But I guess my question, then, Mr. Chairman, is can this board, can we require, like we did at the legislature, to say, Director Quigley, we'd like to do 10 to 15 of these years without compelling and using a bill draft to do that? So I would just throw that out there. And secondly, North Las Vegas has been in the news recently on eminent domain issues, and I've never had a better ally than, I'll say, Assemblywoman June Kiliani when we were in the legislature. And I share her belief that asking businesses to do something is one thing, But the word eminent domain has been thrown around North Las Vegas for the last 90 days. Is there something, is this the better use of that property for the better use of the people, that we could look at maybe something like that would allow the residents to be able to get this land for these bus shelters? Is this maybe the only way we could do it, or is there other ways we could work with businesses, such as Commissioners mentioned?
I think from a staff perspective, it would be our preference that this is a voluntary partnership. That always works better. From experience, it's probably not going to work in every case, and I'm sure it won't. You may have out-of-town ownership that's not vested in the community, or people who have such a negative opinion of bus stops, that we may have some people where we have trouble getting that kind of partnership. But it isn't the only option. We can continue to look for other options if that's the Commission's preference.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I'll just comment on a couple things. One, yes, we can work with the municipalities to work on locations for bus turnouts where practicable, using some of that AB 413 funding that we've got. RTC does not have the authority or power for eminent domain, but we do work with municipalities when it's appropriate. I think the easiest approach, of course, is just working with the businesses themselves to secure those easements.
All right, follow up to that. I agree, Ms. Quigley. I think the thing that distracts me is that we have a world-class bus system with great operators, and maybe, for not the proper word, but maybe a sucky distribution system to put them on the bus. And my goal would be to give you, from when they show up to the bus shelter on, a great experience. And I think that's what Commissioner June Kelly and I are maybe forming again a relationship. So I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Oh, I do? Oh, okay. I'm being corrected. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, the RTC does have the authority to, the eminent domain authority. What you don't have that other jurisdictions to do is your exaction through the zoning ordinances and things like that. That's where you can get a lot of these exactions. But just from experience in the Clark County, a lot of our traffic signal lights are put on properties with just property owners granting us easements without compensation. So I know Carl and I have worked with a few businesses to do that. I think a lot of them will cooperate.
Commissioner.
Thank you. I was just going to follow up on that. I thought we did that through zoning in some cases where we can, so maybe we could explore that part of it. And then as we look at bus turnouts, because the mayor is absolutely correct, the backup of traffic and the impact then on businesses as well as anybody else. In our complete streets, I can't remember now, do we link, school buses are another area that we should be taking a look at as we're doing our zoning and planning to make sure wherever they can have a turnout. And we talked, I know, with Commissioner Brager at one point, Larry, you may remember, about as we do subdivisions that have maybe that are private, that they permit the school bus to turn onto that property so that they're not stuck out in the street. And that may not affect you, but there may be some complement that we can come up with on using some turnouts as far as that. So as we look at this, maybe there's policies out there that local governments have as a restriction, because I remember we wanted to put a bus shelter as you were doing the Sahara, and it was Public Works that we had problems with being able to get the easement. So sometimes we have some restrictions in our own policies that we didn't even realize impacted us. And I recall that. They're all laughing at me. But we had to work that one out. It was just, we're like, what? You're not even granting our own partner access to be able to move the bus shelter back to safe mode. So those might be a couple other areas we could take a look at. Thank you.
Noted.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
All right. If there are no other questions?
Can I just make it clear with respect to what she just said is our eminent domain powers have to be exercised in conjunction with the other entities, but we have to get their approval.
Noted. That concludes your general manager's report, and now we will move on to item number 3, which is to receive the Nevada Department of Transportation Director's Report.
On some projects. As far as Project Neon is concerned, we've had been mentioning that I've been briefing the interim finance committee members of the legislature about an upcoming bonding request. We're down to our last 4 members of that committee that have to be briefed, so we've gone through nearly a couple dozen of members that have been briefed, and it's going well. A lot of questions, and we've been responsive to those questions. The other thing to note is on Project Neon, that we will have some neighborhood meetings on September 18th next week. One of them is going to be in the morning from 9 to noon at the RTC, and one is going to be in the afternoon, UNLV School of Dental Medicine. So there'll be 2 opportunities for the public to attend and get the latest information on Project Neon. The RFQ, request for qualifications responses, are due in a couple of weeks. So we'll have definite idea of which teams are realistically chasing this project. It does cost a lot of expenses. We've talked a little bit about stipends and the effort that goes into chasing a large design-build contract. So we'll know who's actually going to put forth the effort in a couple of weeks. On the future I-11 project, we're proceeding with acquisition of the right-of-way. I have to go to a deposition later today related to acquisition of right-of-way on that project. But we are coordinating our schedules with the RTC of Southern Nevada, getting into an agreement so that we understand what NDOT's responsibilities are going to be on the future Phase 2 project, and just having our schedules synced up so that we deliver the projects together instead of separately. On the federal level, Congress is back in session. They'll be considering a lot of other issues before they get to transportation funding, but currently the annual appropriation expires September 30th, so we're expecting that they will pass a continuing resolution to give us the amount of money that we've been receiving. But as far as the length of time for that continuing resolution, it's not certain yet. But a lot of deliberation to continue on that item. Tiger grants recently were announced for fiscal year 2013, and the only one that was successful from Nevada was a grant to the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe up in northern Nevada. Unfortunately, that's the only one that Nevada did receive, but we're glad for the Paiute tribe there that they were successful on their application. There's still some discussion between the House and the Senate on funding the next federal fiscal year's Tiger program. So there's disagreement. The Senate wants to fund it about $500 million, and the House does not want to fund that program, but they'll have those discussions and eventually work that out. Also, NDOT received $7.3 million in August redistribution from Federal Highway Administration. That's additional funds that other states did not obligate in their federal programs. So NDOT has always had a good track record of receiving funds that were not obligated by other states. So that's good news. There's one other opportunity coming up called Last Day Funds, where they basically clear the books for the federal fiscal year that's ending September 30th and redistribute any kind of funds that are not been obligated by other states. With that, I wanted to have Tracy Larkin-Thomason, my Deputy Director, come up and give a presentation. I know that equity has been a huge issue on transportation projects, especially in consideration of the efforts that Clark County deliberated last week on the fuel tax indexing, and this board considers on the projects for the fuel tax indexing initiative in Southern Nevada. Tracy's going to go over some of the issues related to NDOT funding and where it goes. Take it away, Tracy.
Good morning. My name is Tracy Larkin-Thomason. I'm the Deputy Director for Nevada DOT down here in Southern Nevada. And what I'm going to be giving you is a very high-level kind of brief overview of what funding we receive and basically how it's distributed. So first of all, we have 3 different types of revenues. The Federal Highway Trust Fund, that was fuel tax and other highway user funds, that such as taxes on motor vehicles. It's allocated to the state per MAP 21, which used to be Safety Lou. We are still in the transition of it, even though we've been under the provisions of it for a year. There is some additional flexibility in how it goes out, but we're still also waiting for some rulings on how some of it is spent. The funding is available for reimbursement of expenditures on approved projects. It is not eligible for routine maintenance or for administration, and it typically must be matched by local funds. State funds. The State Highway Fund was established by NRS 408.235. This is basically how NDOT is financed. It also provides funds to the Department of Motor Vehicles and the Department of Public Safety. Other funds. This basically encompasses everything that's not the federal or state funds in there. It's such as AB 5, which was general obligation funds, AB 595, property and vehicle rental tax, and bonding of LVCVA funds was included in this. The AB 544, the general fund surplus, also bond sales, other sales such as surplus property sales, and reimbursements, which would be your local matches. Typically, a local match will range between 5 and 20% to the federal funds. This next one is just representative of how it is divided. You have, we have approximately $343 million of appropriation. That's an average. And again, the percentages I'm going to use are generally representative. They may vary slightly from year to year. And this is basically based on fiscal year 2012. You have on the up corner, it shows like about 19% is the limitation of obligation. Basically, while they may give us, I'm going to just use a fake number, $100 million, they may say you can only spend $95 million of it. So there's a portion that is, while it's typically said we have it, we're not allowed to spend it. And there's also bond repayments in that group. Next, there's between 16 and 17%, which has limited or restricted use for projects in Clark County. And I'll cover more of that in a few minutes. And then about in the bottom, 15 to 16% is dedicated strictly to use in Clark County through various programs. And the remaining, which is just a little under 50%, is basically for the statewide projects. The federal funds that pass through that are sub-allocated to RTC strictly in Clark County is the CMAQ Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Funds, about $20 million. The Metropolitan Planning Funds, approximately $1.5 million. The STP, which is a Surface Transportation Program for the urbanized area down here in Las Vegas, is approximately $31 million. And the Transportation Alternative Programs is about $1.2 million. So again, approximately $54 million. The other areas, these are the ones that I referenced before as restricted use or sub-allocated. I won't go very into detail on them. You have your Surface Transportation Program funds. Again, they're for areas such as greater than 2,000 for Reno, less than 5,000, which is your rural areas, your 5,000 to 2,000 areas, which is Carson City. Recreational trails, the highway crossing, you may have funding there that's used in Clark County, but it has very specific criteria of how it's used. Also, the highway safety program, again, portions of it can be used in Clark County. There are specific criteria used to determine the programs. Now we're moving into state funds. As we receive the state funds in, this is the average state highway fund distribution. Approximately 1% we call is used to others. Others is funding that we pay to other agencies like the Board of Examiners, the Public Works Board, the Department of Information Technology, DMV Trading Division, the Legislative Counsel Bureau, and a few others. 9% goes to the Department of Public Safety, 8% to the Department of Motor Vehicles, another 8% is used for bond reimbursement, and the remaining 74% is what is available for projects. Here's one that I know. This is showing the state gas revenues. This is the combination of regular gas fuels and the special gas fuels, such as diesel. Clark County, over the average of the last 5 years, brings in about 60.5%. What that is composed of, an average of, you have about 68 to 69% that is brought in through regular fuels, and about 41% that is brought in through the special fuels. Washoe County brings in an average of 15.5%, both in the special fuels and in the regular fuels. Very consistent in both areas. All others, basically all the other remaining parts of the state have 15, they bring in 15 to 16% for regular fuels, but they bring in about 43% of the diesel fuels. And a lot of this will be seen because of the freight traffic along the interstate along the northern part. So your Elko County, Pershing, and Lyon would see a good portion of that. On the funding obligation, I also want to be very clear that these are representative and they're not exactly apples to apples, but they're general representatives of the funding that is coming in and the funding that is going out. So on the funding obligated, Clark receives about 55% back. Washoe receives about 12.5%, and all others receive about 32%. And going to last one, this is just a representative to show how it is distributed throughout the state. Again, these are a 5-year average to the other counties, and again, pointing out, just you can see, like in Elko County, it's a little higher, Lyon County, it's a little higher, and Pershing County, and those are some of the areas along the interstate. That really concludes those, so if you have any specific questions on there or any other details you'd like to ask, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Commissioner June Kiliani.
Thank you. I feel like I'm the only one that sometimes. Thank you, and thanks for meeting. I think you've done a very good job. Like you said, this was still a rough profile, but we've never really been able to wrap our arms around what the disparity is or isn't, and the perception of the not getting our equal funding or fair share funding back. And there's still, that's for debate, but you got to get the numbers right in order to be able to know what comes into play. So I do thank you for that part of it. Can you just briefly remind me then, on the motor vehicle fuel tax, the very first tax, that's federal funds come from that? That's the federal funding, it's made up of motor vehicle fuel tax?
There's motor vehicle fuel tax, there's also taxes on some of the motor vehicles themselves.
Okay,
So
in addition to that.
There are other taxes in
And
there.
that's
It's
funding?
It's federal highway user fees.
Okay, and so that funding it cannot be used for admin, can't be used for maintenance, and it has to be matched locally.
Generally, the match is, occasionally there'll be some funding categories that have a 0% match. They're usually very special. Nevada, because we have so much federal land in it, our rate of return is usually 95%, so we have a 5% match. Also, very typical in some categories is a 20%. So it will range between 5 and 20%.
And then the state highway fund, so we're still funding NHP programs and.
There is a portion that basically about 17% goes to the Department of Motor Vehicles and the Department of Public Safety.
Did that go up last session? We used to have fights during the
Yes,
legislature
it went
not
up.
rating
It had a
the highway
22%
fund.
It had a 22% cap. In the last one, it went up to 33%.
Oh, wow.
That is scheduled to go away in the next biennium.
So
It's
it could roll
scheduled-
back to the
It could
22%,
be.
because.
For 1 year of the biennium. it went
Yeah,
up.
So-
at some point, we should probably discuss that, because that gets to be very regressive. The highway fund needs to stay for the highway fund, and if they want to fund general fund agencies out of that, I've always maintained that they should deal with it as a state as far as that's concerned, but not raid the highway fund, because that really does impact where our dollars and your dollars come from. So maybe as a board down the road, if the legislature tries to monkey with that in the wrong way, maybe we could have a conversation or take a position to say, we really don't think you should be funding general fund agencies out of the highway fund, or at least reduce the cap back to at least the 22%, which is still high in and of itself. CMAQ, is that restricted money in any way?
It is, CMAQ is actually passed through directly to the MPOs, the RTC. In this case, it is Clark County and Washoe County receive it. It is the funding of the projects that are decided are under their jurisdiction, and both areas are non-attainment, although I do believe the Reno is now a maintained non-attainment area.
So
But-
they could use, because it's for congestion as well as air quality, so it's programs.
Congested, so it could be used for things like transit and buses, and then basically capacity projects that improve the air quality.
Okay, so bike lanes even could come into play with that?
I believe so. That one I'm really not
Okay.
completely sure.
There just may be other multimodals, but maybe we could take a look at working with since it's a pass-through, let's look at light rail and/or something that connects North Las Vegas all the way to the airport through a corridor. Just a thought. But, if there's extra money well, it's not extra, but it's money that could be used to relieve congestion and help air quality, there might be some creative sources that would help, as you all are studying not only Maryland Parkway corridor, but some of the other things that are out there. Thank you very
Duly
much.
noted. We know that's a priority for a lot of the community.
Any other questions?
Yes. Any other questions? I have a few. And likewise, I appreciate the briefing. It was very nice. There's no question that the fair share is going to become perhaps the issue next session. And Tracy, as you and I spoke, I'm not so concerned about the past as much as from today moving forward. And the statistics, and you talk to 5 different people and they'll give you 5 different answers as far as the numbers, where the money goes. Are we truly getting our fair share? But one of the things, retrospectively, when we in Southern Nevada did the Beltway, and that traditionally would be a state function, reviews those dollars. A few years back, the LVCVA was asked to use their funding to do the I-15. So those are local dollars that traditionally should come from the state, but we're using our dollars here, and therefore the state's using that money elsewhere. I mean, that's the kind of, and it was needed, there's no question, we couldn't wait, but that's the kind of perceived inequity that I think we really have to address and try to eliminate. The point as far as that cap at 22 or 33%, those are critical policy decisions that play into this whole equity. Are the funds being used appropriately? Is Clark County contributing and not receiving that return benefit? As we move forward, and certainly Rudy has done a wonderful job as far as committing the state to Project Neon and I-11, as he does every month for us. It's important that we communicate real numbers. You know, where are the dollars from Clark County going, and what kind of benefit are we receiving? I think that's the only ask I have today, is to make sure that we don't play the numbers games, that we don't, you know, shift money from here to there, and we basically say, here it is. And they are what they are. If the dollars, if there is an inequity, and if we aren't getting fair share, let's state that and the reasons why. If we are getting the appropriate money, well, let's communicate that. I think the problem that I've seen over the past few years is you have different stakeholder groups arguing about the same numbers and pretty much confusing the issue. And that just causes more controversy, more dialogue, more accusations. So as you and I spoke, I think it's important today to move forward and be able to, as NDOT and the RTC and our member agencies, to be able to step up and say, here are the dollars and here's where they're going, and be able to just stand up and defend why.
No, I agree with your point. I understand your point. There are a few things I did want to say, is that when some of how we measure, so when you look at these numbers here, and I do recognize anyone can take these numbers and interpret them many different ways, is that the way we report, have been reporting, the way our reporting system is set up on projects, the year that the project goes out is the year that it's reported in. And I recognize that we want to avoid, I guess what I should say, we want to avoid any untransparency, not a good word, muddiness of where the money is, but there is shifting of money, and part of that's a reality. Some projects are better as state projects, some projects are better as federalized projects. It leans towards the type of parameters that are for each of those projects. So some of I'm not going to say they're interchangeable, but what might start as 50% federal and 50% state may actually end up being paid at a different proportion of that as things move forward. You might have other factors that come in to affect it. But I think our goal is really to be more transparent in how we are doing it, and to listen to what you're saying so you understand where we are spending these dollars.
Mayor Lee.
Thank you. Tracy, on the percentage of obligations to the other 16 counties, is most of those counties is just pavement preservation and things like that? Because we as residents do travel the same roads, you know, across Nevada as everyone else.
The majority of preservation is, most of the rural counties do have preservation. You will see some greater application of funding on the I-80 corridor.
Yeah,
much more
but
substantial.
for the most part, Esmeralda and all that stuff, that's just maintaining current system, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Occasionally, we are looking on some of the major routes like US 93, 95, and that is basically increasing some of the mobility. It's not adding capacity, but be adding things like a passing lane or a truck climbing lane.
I see. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Commissioner June Kiliani.
Thank you. Along those lines, have we had less opportunities for some of the rural counties to try to give the state county roads that they then have to maintain, which then takes away Clark County's money in the long run? I still remember 6 Mile Canyon, John probably does as well, and how many times did we kill that bill? But it was, part of it was.
And we still
you
don't
know
own it.
exactly what I'm talking about. But I mean, you had some smaller local governments that kept trying to give it to the state, which then ate up highway dollars to maintain a county, truly a county road in some cases. And I think those are further disparities, but I just saw Assemblywoman Irene
There are
Bustamante come in, but.
Excuse me.
That's okay.
There are movements that, to try to basically transfer roadways which are more appropriately a local roadway back. Some of the issues right now, particularly with the recession, and we've been dealing semi-successfully with this for 10, 15 years, is they truly can't afford to take them back.
And so that would lead to my next point, is we still have several highways right through the middle of our town that are federal highways and/or state highways, Trop, Sahara, Charleston, that people may not realize. And that has to be a conversation at some point. And it always was, how do you get that roadway up to what our level of standard would be if we're going to take it over? And then what are some long-term maintenance dollars? It may be time again to have that conversation as we look at our multi-mobility within the community, because then it's like trying to call your office and say, oh, there's no flashing pedestrian sign on this corner. It's really you, but everybody thinks it's the county or the city of Las Vegas or North Las Vegas that's responsible for it, and it really isn't. And so that could be one conversation. The secondary one, I still go back, Commissioner Brown's absolutely correct. It's knowing where the dollars are intended. So even though your programming starts out with this is where we think our costs are, and the reality is it shifts to 60-40, 80-20, depending on circumstances, there's apparently no way for us at this point to glean what those changes have been through the life of a project, which then could actually help with the argument that we're doing it okay for fair share or not doing it okay for fair share. So that's part of what I think you're still working on, is how do you glean and better flush that as a project moves forward so that we know where our dollars are coming and going. You know, in the very first capture, Mayor was just mentioning, and the federal fuel tax, when you take that, is that money that's allocated to local jurisdictions as well as to the state? And so those are commingled, or is that just solely federal? Does federal tax, fuel tax, only go to the state of Nevada?
You know, I don't know the full answer to that.
Okay.
I do know I deal with the apportionment that comes to the state, and that is by formula, and that's based on several factors, such as the amount of federal land that's owned in the state, the population, the size, their system, and so on. There are some pass-throughs, obviously, that come through and go directly to different areas,
Right.
local areas. And there are and certainly the federal, DOT affords different grant programs that are open to all different agencies.
To compete with, right? So I think just as we try to get a handle on fair share, because it is a valid question, it's valid for us in Southern Nevada. I mentioned that in 1991, we had our fair share, but it was dealing with sales tax collection. It wasn't on fuel tax. And then last session, SB 322 looked at the makeup of the Transportation Board. That became a focal point of making sure at least that we had Southern Nevada representation on that part of it to help with the distribution, I guess, of projects that were coming into play. So there's a lot of factors that are out there that affect the debate, but we need to know what policies sometimes are being done. Then we could go to our own legislators and say, we don't think you should raise that cap to 33% because now you're exporting more money from Clark County to other places. And while we recognize we have a state as a whole and we do have to maintain rural highway roads that get hit with snow and ice and other factors, it's how much do we subsidize if that's the case. And so those are the conversations that we need to be able to weigh in on in a timely manner. So that may be something that for next session we could have more of a response to. Thank you.
We want the message that you and the director are sending to be the message that we're sending. And a lot of issues came up last week at the commission meeting. The question was raised, do all counties take advantage of enabling indexing the gas? No, they don't. And the issue then became, well, why, if counties are not doing as much as they can, why do we go in and subsidize? I think you responded, some of those counties, it would be pennies. I mean, I don't know how many gas stations in some of our rurals, but that's the kind of information that we need to share and communicate. The other one, and this I think had some validity, was when we take I-11 Phase 2 and use local dollars to do that, we in Southern Nevada hope that the state doesn't say, great, we don't have to pay $200 million, we can use that money elsewhere. We shouldn't be penalized or punished. It should be an incentive. You know, if we're doing all this and more in Southern Nevada, we should be first in line for those dollars and priority dollars as they come available. And those are the issues that are being discussed in Southern Nevada now, to make sure, again, that what you're communicating is what we're communicating. And I certainly, on the record, want to thank you, Tracy, and the director, because I think we are moving in a better direction. There's a far more partnership feel with the RTC and NDOT, and that only can be strengthened as we move forward and keep the integrity of our message out there.
Mr. Chair,
Mayor Tobler.
And I appreciate you coming out also and explaining this to us in a more global way than what we saw before. But just speaking to what you had just mentioned, if I understand the 55%, let's say the I-11 was included in there, the grants would be included in the 55%, the federal grants, correct?
Yes.
So that does kind of show that we're including some monies that are going to raise up to 55%, otherwise they would have been down lower, so.
No question. But moving forward, Director, you will be there for us. I know you will.
Yes, if you could sum up our position on it, it would be 3 words: we get it.
Thank you, Tracy.
I would just like to close out with a couple of comments, just to finish the director's report. One was, it was mentioned about Senate Bill 322 and the change on the Transportation Board. I misspoke last month. I actually went back and looked at the actual final bill language, and it didn't include the legislative recommendation to the governor that I had mentioned last time. So the governor's office will be vetting candidates for that. Definitely feel free to contact the governor's office if you have some folks that are interested or want to kind of throw their hat in the ring for that consideration. Again, that was for the Attorney General stepping off at the Transportation Board and another member from Clark County representing the area on the Transportation Board, which will take place after the first of the year. The other thing to mention was recently we briefed our Transportation Board on our disparity study at NDOT. Looks at specific NDOT construction contracts and professional services contracts. We are recommending a 3-year goal of 7.5%. That's subject to a lot of public comment. Now, in the month of October, we'll have a couple of meetings statewide, including down here in Clark County, to vet that disparity study, which is in its draft form and can be accessed through our website.
A couple of things. One, I also want to thank Tracy Larkin for all her effort on bringing forth those numbers. These are the most transparent numbers that we've ever seen, and it was a lot of work, I know, for her to put that report together for you to collect those numbers, so thank you to her. Question for Rudy: who is going to be on? Who is the selection committee for determining the appointment to the NDOT board?
I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
I know that I'm assuming that it's primarily the governor's side, the executive branch, some members there, probably the governor and his chief of staff and maybe his chief counsel at least, because his chief counsel has been making a huge effort to coordinate with us on a regular basis to understand transportation issues, as well as his chief of staff, Gerald Gardner.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, go ahead.
Commissioner G mentioned it, but I did want to, I think Assemblywoman Bustamante Adams came in. I don't know if she's still here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to have you here.
All right. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, we can now move on to your consent agenda, which is items 5 through 56, although, as noted, we would like to pull item number 54.
Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? And that motion carries.
Thank you very much. We now move on to item number 58, and I believe Sue Joseph will be handling that item.
Thank you. My name, for the record, is Sue Joseph. I'm Manager of Transit Special Services last board meeting, staff reviewed feedback received from the paratransit RFP industry review process. Based on this information, you were provided with a set of recommendations. The first one is to keep the award as a single contract. Next is to permit parent companies to provide audited financial statements on behalf of the proposers in a format of RTC's choosing. To increase the requirement of the local management team's previous experience. To maintain the current RFP requirement to have proposers determine the appropriate level of staffing. To leave the definition of substantial deviation unchanged. To permit staff to develop a recommendation following a peer review. Include innovation criteria as part of the experience tab of the RFP and only scored as a technical submission. One of the items that we need to bring back today is concerning the recommendation following a peer review as it pertains to scheduling and productivity requirements within the RFP. The peer review results indicated that 80% of those agencies contacted actually contract out their scheduling functions. And the most common reasons given for this decision had to do with the fact that the contractor can dedicate greater resources at a lower cost to the public, and it reduces the potential for conflict, providing responsibility and accountability in a more centralized location. And this was the issue that was brought up during the industry review. Based on the peer review, staff is recommending a model of a variation for scheduling that includes RTC retaining reservations in our call center and contracting out the scheduling activities. What this means is that the contractor will provide the scheduling function to include optimizing daily routes during the reservation process, manage the subscription trip process, and oversee the design and maintenance of the scheduling parameters, working very closely with RTC staff to assure both productivity and quality assurance goals for the schedules. RTC staff will be transitioned to monitor the scheduling activity through various reports, virtual monitoring, and on-site reservations, observations. Based on this series of recommendations, we are also recommending to adjust the evaluation of the technical factors in step 1. So beginning with management approach, key personnel and staffing and personnel plan, this factor would remain the same at 40%. For work and startup plans, we are suggesting an increase of 5%. What this will accomplish is allowing that the operations management plan, which will include the scheduling function, along with the training and fleet maintenance plans, will all be rated equally. And also to bring in the innovative plan, which will then be able to be scored as it was in the fixed route RFP at 5%. Then to balance everything off, we would take the experience and references and reduce it by 5%. We're comfortable in this based on our placing a heavier weight on the local management rather than the corporate experience. With this in mind, our final recommendation for the commission is that staff recommends approval of the final solicitation structure of the Paratransit Services RFP and contract language based on the industry feedback and peer review.
Ms. Joseph, did we, at last meeting, decide on the cone of silence on this one?
The cone of silence will be from issuance through, I believe, posting, right? Yes, posting.
Okay. Comments or questions from the board? Commissioner G?
Thank you. So, item 1, and I apologize, I'm looking back, I saved last month's. It was whether or not to split the contract. The industry had actually discussed that at one time, when you had your meetings. Industry input at last board meeting, it said, consider providing an option to split the procurement into 2 lots and allow for management team synergies. Staff is not recommending to do that, it's recommending to do only one.
Correct.
Is there an issue of monopolization that gets raised that we have to deal with at some point?
No, because, actually, I can have legal address that, but it's our understanding that because it actually goes through a bid process, that monopolization in its technical definition doesn't apply.
I just think we need to be aware if that's the case, because that's a possibility. I remember from 2 years ago, or however long ago it was. Second thing was the issue of retaining reservations and contract out scheduling activities. Tell me how retaining, currently we do it all in-house.
Currently, there's a blend between in-house and the contractor. It's a pretty,
So what
I
is
can
the
have
staff-
Sue explain the process, but it's a pretty difficult process. It's fairly bureaucratic in the way the existing
So what is
process
the difference that's being recommended by staff versus what we do right now?
Sue, you want to handle that?
Let's see. What we're recommending is to give the contractor more direct authority to take the resources and apply them where they know best. They oftentimes your better schedulers come out of the driving force because they experience it
understand.
in a live situation. And that is a disconnect. Obviously, we certainly post for jobs, but we don't have jobs being posted that often in that particular situation. So that element is not available to us on a regular basis.
Okay.
Additionally, what we have said is that we want to have better productivity. We've seen a decrease in productivity over time, and we want to find ways to improve that because that translates to a direct cost savings. And we think that our contractors can bring in a national perspective of how things can be done, and they can help us to obtain those productivity goals. And they themselves brought up the issue. We were not originally headed down this path. We thought we were going to be just kind of rolling out the same model, but they rightfully brought up the fact that if we want to impress upon them certain issues relative to productivity, they needed more control. So we've listened to that concern, and we feel that this is a realistic way to handle it, is to give them more authority to do this, but still placing some real controls on it so that they have to meet certain standards.
Okay,
And
so
there
when we
certainly will be issues if they don't.
So when we say contract out, that means the company can do it or they can find someone else. That's their choice on how they choose to do the scheduling.
They
That's
could
what I was trying to.
subcontract it, yes, if they felt that that
Well,
was to
that's the
their
way it kind of
advantage.
reads to me, or contract out. So what you're really saying is us contract that out and let the companies handle that. How do they interface then the retain reservations from us?
That will be a new element. It's not always done that way, but we have had a very good success in specialized services over at least the last 10 years of working very closely with our contractors, really in a team environment. And we see that continuing, where we work as one team to make all of that work. Our customer service manager, myself, and other members of the team will be working with them to resolve any issues. The other nice thing is that they're going to be controlling the back end of our Trapeze software. So they're going to help take all of their national expertise and write into that particular software better elements to help us schedule. And that may reduce some of the issues that might normally come up, because they'll have control of that.
I would suspect scheduling is your major cost factor no matter what. If you
Yes.
don't do it right, it's going to cost you 5 trips versus 1, number
Correct.
one. Number two, I just want to make sure if we're moving in that direction, I just wasn't clear why we were retaining the reservation. But is it because you feel comfortable about that part and that can be woven into what they do scheduling-wise? Or maybe I don't understand what reservations are, but I'm thinking it's my neighbor whose daughter is a wonderful human being, but she's totally disabled physically, and she knows every day she goes to work, so it's at, 5 days a week at this time. Those are our reservations, correct?
That would be, that reservation that you just described, Commissioner, would actually be handled by the contractor, because that would be a subscription trip.
Okay.
All right? But that subscription trip would emanate through our call center, and a request would be sent to the contractor. Right now, that request is sent to our scheduling. The reason for us continuing with this blend is that we have a very rich investment in our call center. We've just made the outsourcing of the fixed route, and we're seeing some vast improvements in our ability to take the rides and service the customers better. And we feel that that investment needs to continue.
Okay. And so you feel comfortable with that blend can
We
move
do.
forward, and it actually will help the clients in the long run who are supposed to.
In the long
ride
run,
this.
if there are better schedules, they'll have, better on-time performance. There will be less complaints about some of the things that we have heard. So yes, we think that this is bringing in that national expertise that we already do for the driving and the maintenance. We're just expanding that now to say, take this national expertise and help us build better schedules.
Okay, and then complaints, though, or concerns would still go to our customer service?
That
then?
is correct.
Okay, so we still have some control over that, and then we work as a
Absolutely.
team with whoever's selected. And then training, we talked about making sure that there's more than adequate training for the
It's one of the
drivers
top
as
three
well as.
factors,
Yeah, okay.
yes.
All right, that's a very key component in my opinion. Thank you.
With that direction from staff, the recommendation, entertain a motion. Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? And the motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Your last item is item number 59. This is to approve and adopt resolution number 315, supporting local hiring on fuel tax indexing projects, and authorize the chairman to sign. You have before us resolution number 315. I'll read it for the record. Resolution supporting local hiring on fuel tax indexing projects. Whereas Clark County's consistent goal and challenge is to establish the county's economic vitality and ensure ongoing job creation, to ensure that the county's unemployed persons are given opportunities to return to work and new areas of employment are created for future generations. And whereas the construction and infrastructure industry is an essential element of Clark County's economy. And whereas businesses, workers, governments, and legislators worked together in the 77th 2013 session of the Nevada Legislature and developed Assembly Bill 413 fuel tax indexing, which is intended to catalyze the construction and maintenance of Clark County's infrastructure, and was signed into law on June 12, 2013. And just note, not in there, but it had overwhelming bipartisan support. Whereas the Clark County Board of Commissioners adopted fuel tax indexing on September 3, 2013, and indexing will provide funding for approximately $700 million of much-needed roadway projects as set forth in an analysis conducted by Hobsong and Associates on July 25, 2013, and considered by the County Commissioners. And whereas fuel tax indexing will create an estimated 4,738 to 5,526 direct person years of employment within the construction industry and related sectors during project implementation timeframes as set forth by the analysis conducted by Hobsong and Associates on July 24th, 2013, and considered by the County Commissioners. And whereas the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada is working with the local governments and business communities to develop opportunities for local residents to become employed on planned projects. And whereas the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada is dedicated to identifying opportunities to maximize the use of local workers and local companies for the Commission's projects, especially those supported by local funds. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada reaffirms the Commission's commitment, subject to all applicable legal requirements, to encourage the use, retention, and selection of companies that are dedicated to our community and the goals expressed herein. I have in front of me also a letter of support from our Vice Chairwoman, Deborah March. If you'd like, I can read it. or I can give you copies.
Why don't we put it into the record?
Okay.
Perhaps you can read.
I can just paraphrase it. She ends it with, "I urge my fellow board members to adopt and support this precedent-setting resolution that will further communicate our intent and the importance to the RTC, the other local jurisdictions, and the Nevada Department of Transportation to employ local companies on fuel tax indexing projects, especially on projects that are 100% locally funded. I also encourage each of you to adopt similar resolutions within your jurisdictions."
Commissioner.
Thank you. I had handed out just a suggested rewrite of wordsmithing more than anything else of the very final paragraph that should be hopefully available for the public as well. It was, after we had our briefing yesterday, I had a couple more calls from folks that testified at our county commission meeting that wanted to make it clear of who and what we were embracing as far as when we're talking about locals. So I just make the suggestion, and it's up to the board, kind of rewrote the final, "Now therefore be it resolved that the RTC of Southern Nevada reaffirms the commission's commitment to the goals outlined herein, subject to all applicable legal requirements to encourage the use, retention, and selection of companies, especially those that support minority and women-owned businesses that show dedication to our community by holding local business license, generate local taxes, and pay living wages." And it was to tighten it up, because that, I think, was the testimony that we were hearing, is the recognition of that part. So I'm hoping legal says it's not a substantive change, but I just kind of played, it read so dry in the long run. If I could
I
hear
have had a
from
conversation with our external general counsel, and he was comfortable with this suggested language that you submitted, but I will ask also Chris Figgins.
I would, it's certainly raises a question, but I'd take out the word especially and use the
Okay.
word including.
I had that originally in my notes, so thank you very much. Okay, so Mr. Chair, if there's no other, I would make a motion to adopt the resolution, insert the final paragraph of "now it be resolved," and delete the word especially and insert the word including.
Motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your last item is item number 60, which is to conduct your last citizens' participation period.
As the cards come up, this is our second public comment period. Those wishing to speak to the board. Leandro Castro. Jim Rothstein. Please.
Hi, my name is Jim Rothstein. This week I returned to Las Vegas after a 6-month stay in Asia. And at the airport, I tried to buy a 30-day bus pass, but the airport dispenser does not sell 30-day passes. Okay, this is a small problem, but I was still a little disappointed. This is not the reason why I'm here today. I am here because I live in Las Vegas. I ride the bus every day. And third, in August, while I was away in China, I heard a local Las Vegas radio show discuss our bus system. And perhaps call-in radio is not the best way for a nuanced discussion. Nonetheless, I was not satisfied with the answers I heard or their completeness against my own experience riding buses in Las Vegas. So I'm here today. Can you please suggest 2 or 3 individuals, not a website, who are open to active citizen contribution, people I can contact, with the goal of helping accurately identify problems and hopefully prioritizing or following up and maybe even solving problems, or at least reporting them accurately. And when I say problems, probably to you they're the low-hanging fruit, but I'd be happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Arlene Shively. Patricia Anderson.
Well, good morning, Patricia Anderson. I know the meeting's going to be long. I don't want to take too much time. We did talk about the last time about the drivers working on their day off. I don't know if you resolved that problem or not, because I'm very, concerned about them. 5 days is enough for any driver. Drivers should work 5, and then they have to off there 2. I know you're short of drivers. I understand that point. But the point about it is we need to reinstate the drivers that we had. That's my concern. A lot of drivers had to leave for personal reasons, family matters, what have you, or they were sick, whatever. They should not have jeopardized their job, and it's not fair to them. As far as the $265, I know we went through this before. I know they don't have any lunchtime. I understand that. From New York City, I just came from New York City. It's a much larger state. What's fact remains, everybody has an hour for lunch. I think what I would like to do, and like to meet with anybody, because as I said, the $265 they need to put back in their paycheck. I've been concerned about that. The reduced pass for the other states. So people have I've been observing on the buses. The drivers will not honor it. They say this is not honored. Now, if you have a reduced pass from Colorado or Michigan, whatever the case shall be, it should be honored. A lot of drivers are not accepting them, and they want them to pay full fare. Now, I think this, I've been observing, and I think that there should not be. The back of the reduced card, I think it should be a signal. It should be like a little code. If you don't have your reduced card, to show the back that this you did pay and you have your reduced, like a little signal, a little card, a little emblem. This is what my suggestion. Another thing I suggest, and I was in New York observing, we should have the seal. The drivers are not protected in Las Vegas. They should have the seal. It's a seal goes over, and it's like, and the drivers are protected. And I think that we should try to do that. I didn't have, to see if we can get this for these drivers. And as far as the bus stop is concerned, a lot of bus stops, I know they said the bus stops have a lot of walls. That's really hard. But a lot of times it's kind of dangerous, standing there waiting for the buses. So I was wondering if I know it's hard to, that's private property, so it's kind of hard to go back and everything. But in other words, if you could do the shield for the drivers, and this time point, I think the time point shouldn't have it. Okay, all right. You have a nice weekend and take care. Bye bye.
Thank you. One last call for Leandro Castro. Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak to the board?
Morning, my name is Sam Santoria, Vice President, ATU Local 1637. I have this for the board members. We can get that up there. You also give one to Ms. Quigley if you would, and Mr. Keating. And this is what I'm going to be reading to you this morning. To the Honorable RTC Commissioners, subject RTC Staff Assistant General Manager Jerry Keating. Commissioners, at this time I am asking that our Vice President Sal Santoria read this formal complaint, since I cannot be present to read to the Commission due to the fact the ATU in good faith is negotiating with Keolis at this time for a collective bargaining agreement and trying to avoid any service disruptions. On behalf of the bargaining unit employees that ATU represents, we would like to say that I wish I was present to read ATU's formal complaint in the manner Mr. Keating, Assistant General Manager, treated ATU Local 1637 by initiating a letter dated September 10th, 2013 to to the RTC's contractors, MV and Keolis, that ATU was not to use offices at the RTC properties. Not only were his actions very unprofessional, but they were unwarranted since RTC has refused to negotiate a CBA with the ATU Local 1637. In addition, RTC and Mr. Keating put both companies in jeopardy by forcing ATU Local 1637 to go file unfair labor practice charges against them with the NLRB. The most embarrassing moment for ATU Local 1637 was from Mr. Keating's actions when Allied Barton Security showed up at the ATU's new hire employee orientation to tell us that RTC asked them to escort us out of the Simmons Yard immediately. ATU had to abruptly leave and tell the new hire class for MV we had to leave. An apology is due to these new hire employees. While the ATU did receive an apology from Mr. Keating yesterday, ATU believes that was done because Mr. Keating was told to do so from someone from the ranks of the RTC commissioners, and whoever it was, we thank them because RTC has no business getting involved in our negotiations with the contractors. One of the sections of the CBA is that we are allowed to have a union office at the yards, and it is to be negotiated. In closing, this is America, and everybody in this country is innocent until proven guilty. And it is the ATU's belief that Mr. Keating, has gotten involved to an incident that happened to our VP, that RTC has found him guilty before he even goes through his employer's grievance process. It is our opinion that RTC has violated his civil rights, and that will be addressed accordingly. Respectfully submitted, Jose Mendoza Jr., President, Business Agent, ATU Local 1637. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to the board?
Did you get my little sheet of paper? I'm next.
Seeing and, did you want to speak, ma'am?
I always was. And,
Well, you're going to have to come up to the mic.
I can't get to the mic.
We'll bring a mic to you.
I don't need a mic.
Yes, you do.
Very loud, howling voice that
No, I can hear you, but we need to record it for the record.
I'm serious, I really don't need a mic, because I'm in problems with Mr. Keating over the choice of my voice. I think Mr. Keating has, quote, designated himself not only the President of the United States, but the President of this racist-tainted club, which I can no longer call whatever the federal government calls it. I'm only one person on the paratransit. That's because Tuesday, I'll be 86, and God has made me fight for 86 years of my life against all kinds of discrimination, regardless of whether you're mentally handicapped, physically handicapped, or whatever. Now, my issues today are only on the paratransit program, and you know I've expressed them before. I've now hired an attorney. I'm going to go to federal court because his power is so great that he cannot understand that there is a God who, when he gets his foot out of whatever part that Mr. Rodriguez says, I want to put mine into his, we will have a well settled. I may not live long enough. If I make Tuesday with 86 years, I will be one of the fortunate ones. I don't know why God leaves me here to fight the issue of paratransit people and all other. I can't fight the issues of this man who just came because I'm not involved in that. I'm 86. I can only know that the paratransit riders, we as a group, we are being mistreated, abused, and whatever. I don't even know what the certification process is legally with the federal government, but I'm about to spend money to find out why. The federal government has to look at the activities of this RTC, regardless of whether one man controls it. Quigley gets up here and she speaks. She's not in charge. Let me tell you, there's always somebody underneath pushing her, or above her, like God pushing her. So whatever motivates her to do as she does, she has people who work for her,
And all the people who work for her, I will say, God is giving them, quote, Christian energy to do the right thing. Whether it gets placed in the right places at the so-called heads or whoever appoints themselves to be a head. Mr. Keating, I don't know what his problem is with life. I don't want to get racially, I don't want to get genderized with his activities with Mr. Rodriguez, because I will be, as my attorney said to me, be very careful, Arlene, because number one, my negative opinions today are very, quote, high, and of course, my anger is very high. Anger does not decrease as you get older and still see injustices going on that supposedly civilized people
Ma'am,
should have solved.
we're going to have to close out your
Okay,
statement. Did
bye.
you give your
If
name for the record? Did you give
I'll
your name?
leave my initials.
Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the board? Seeing and hearing no one, this meeting is adjourned.